Well, hey folks, so today we're going to talk about lower thirds. If you don't know what lower thirds are, they're the little thing that appears at the bottom lower third of the screen whenever you have a person appearing on the news. We talked about doing these with the TriCaster, and so we're going to learn how to make our own, and make it totally our own. Now, you can obviously do things varying degrees of, say, complexity, but we're going to do something kind of minimalist here. We're going to have some graphics in the background kind of appearing. We're going to have everything sort of fade in, as it were. So let's just start off in Photoshop here. This is going to be a good deal simpler than the earlier thing we did with the videography. So let's just go ahead and open up Adobe Photoshop. And we do, you're going to create a new document. It's going to be in the sort of video and film kind of dialogue here. I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a second here. Alright, so Photoshop opens up, and we'll just create a new one. And let's go to where it says Film and Video, and choose HD TV 1080p, right? So it's going to be 1920 by 1080, 72 pixels per inch, that's fine. RGB color mode with white in the background, doesn't matter, we're going to get rid of the background before we import this into Premiere. So let's go ahead and start this off, and we're going to just begin by creating some shapes here. So find your Shapes tool. In this case, we've got several different tools to choose from. If you just press U on the keyboard, you should see this little tool pop up here. And it's going to be either ellipse or polygon or line. Just make sure that you choose rectangle in this case. So I have this set to make a shape, which is going to be its own kind of like layer here. And you'll see in the layer menu, if you don't see this little layer menu right here, your layers, go to Window and Layers, and that'll make it show up there. So layers, if I were to have this set as a shape, if I were just to draw a rectangle here, I'm going to start off on this little guide that's towards the edge here. This is my little safety bumper here, as it were. I'm just going to pull this out and make it about, let's say, yay big. You know, it's going to be towards the lower third, about 2 inches tall, about 12 inches wide, according to the measurements here on my Premiere. And I'm going to make another rectangle slightly smaller and slightly kind of shorter and more narrow, as it were, less wide, and it's going to be right below it. So we're going to have our person's name, and they're going to have their title right below it. So I'll pull this down just to kind of put this in order here. I'm going to have I'll call this name, and I'll call it whatever color. So you can make it whatever color you want. If you can even click on this and just have it selected with the little select with the move tool here, and then go back to your shapes menu, and you can actually change the fill at any point you want, right? So if I want to make this sort of rose color, or this little green color, whatever you want, whatever color you want to, I'll stick with this little gray blue color. So this will be my name, and I'll just call it name blue, and this will be my subtitle, and I'll call it subtitle blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my name, I'm going to say duplicate the layer, and I'm going to call this name, and instead of calling it blue, I'm going to call it white. And then with my shapes tool selected, with this layer selected, my shapes tool selected, I'm going to change the color to white. And I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of my background. I'm going to make put a little eyeball icon here, make that backwards. And I'm going to just make this slightly bigger. I'm going to get my move tool here. If you don't see these little anchor points, just make sure you have show transform controls checked up at the top there. I'm just going to make this slightly wider than the shape below it. And then I'll press enter here. I'm just going to pull this name white down below there. So we have this little kind of white tag, as it were, kind of hanging out next to it. I'll do the same thing for the subtitle blue. I'm going to right click on it, do duplicate layer, and call it subtitle white. So in this case, you can choose white if you'd like, but you can also choose any other color you'd like, just so long as it's sort of differentiated. Once again, I'm going to pull this out just slightly and change the color to white. And so once again, when I pull this down below it, it'll show just a little bit of a tag out there. Alright, so the last thing we'll put in is a little ellipse. So clicking on my shape tool here, I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to draw a circle by holding on the shift key to make it kind of constrain it to a perfect circle here. I'll make it about, let's say, it looks like it's about 7 inches wide here, 7 inches tall or so. That's about right. and I'll fill it with a different color. I'll choose this sort of muted green color. Again, you can choose whatever color you think looks nice with it. And I'll move this down to the area below the names here. So I'll have it kind of peeking out from the edge of the screen. Again, you can make this bigger if you'd like. You can make this take up the entire sort of like bottom sort of corner if you'd like this. That's fine. I'm going to get a little bit smaller here. Just gonna put, again, whatever you think looks nice, you can make it your own. So this will be about it, and I'll just make sure that the ellipse is on the bottom of the layer stack here. So we've got our ellipse down below our subtitle white. So we have in sort of from the top, we've got our name that's blue, we've got our name that's white, we've got our subtitle, we've got our subtitle that's white, and then we've got our ellipse. I might just take these two and make them slightly taller, just so I can fit the subtitle in there a little bit easier. Just thinking in terms of where the text is going to go. We're going to add any text here. Let's go ahead and go File, Save, and I'm going to call this. I'll just call this Red and Blue. I'll just save this right here. And yeah, so you name it whatever you'd like as far as your lower thirds go. And let's go ahead and close this out, and we'll open up Premiere. Close out Photoshop, open up Premiere Pro. As this loads up, what we're doing is called a two-tiered lower third. So we'll make a new project. I'll call this Lower Thirds Lobello. And I'll open this up. And let's go ahead and start off with a color matte. Just click on the little paper there and select color matte, and have it be 1920 by 1080. Press OK, and I'll just choose like a neutral gray here, just so I can put that in the back, and I'll call it Lower Third Lobello. That'll save me the trouble of having to rename it something later. So our sequence is now called Lower Third Lobello. So we're going to drop in our green and blue Photoshop document, or whatever colors you decide to name it, if you name it after yourself, whatever you name it, whatever. So find your Photoshop document. I made myself a new folder here, and I'm just going to pull this down right here to the Photoshop document. I'll click on my Premiere Pro, and I'll once again we're given this little layered file dialog. Choose Sequence, press OK. Oh, yeah, background's not there. Good. So make sure the background is unchecked. Make sure there's no background coming in. Just want to see everything from the below. So once again, comes in as this little nested document with all the different elements. Let's double click on the sequence. Let's select all of our clips here. Right click on them, copy, and back to our lower third sequence. Uncheck video track 1. Check video track 2. Control V. And I'll just make this a bit taller so I can see all of my clips here. So we have all of our stuff there. Okay. So with this, let's go ahead and extend all this a little bit longer. I'll make this about 10 seconds. I'll select all the clips. I'll make this about 10 seconds long. And we'll just have this all kind of come in over the course of about 2 seconds or so. So let's start with the name, the blue-green name. And let's have this just sort of wipe in. It's going to have a sort of a transition. Instead of animating it with keyframes, we can just use our wipe transition. So let's click on that track up there. It's on V6 on mine. It might be on something else with yours. I'll go to Effects. Oops. Right, once again, let's see if I can't make this a bit easier to see here. Go to Effects. Find your video transitions, find wipe, and it's going to be down a ways. It's all in alphabetical order, so find wipe down here, and we're just going to kind of pull this in right about there, to the edge there, and we'll just kind of extend this out. Now you can extend out your transitions. If you look at this, it sort of zips in like that. You can extend your wipes to be about, let's say, 2 seconds in length here, and we'll do the same thing to the block below it, put the transition on there and have it right alongside of it so you can see this little element sort of appears and leads it a bit. In fact, what I can do is I can actually have this end a little bit sooner so it leads it the whole time. There we go. Maybe even not quite so soon. I'll zoom in some and I'll see if I can get it a little bit closer. Right, a little bit closer together. So I want to be able to see that little graphical element the whole time. That's great. Okay, cool. And we can even, shrink. We can even, manipulate it even more. But I think that's fine. And we'll do the same thing to the subtitle and with both the blue and the white here. So once again, grab your white. I'll just pull it for both these two here. Subtitle. Okay, well, and we'll just have this right there, and right about here. And let's see how this looks. Kind of come together like this. That's great. Okay. I might even have this last a bit longer, so maybe we can time the kind of coming together because it's a bit shorter. So that's good. Okay, cool. You notice that even though the transition goes all the way to 2 seconds, it takes a little less than 2 seconds for it to complete. We could manipulate that more with the keyframes, but that's not really necessary this time. Okay, so the last thing we'll do is get our ellipse, and we'll do the same thing we did before. Let's see if we can't find the moment where the two graphical elements extend past the ellipse. Right about here is where they both get past the ellipse itself. So I'm going to open up my effect controls. I'm going to click on my position keyframe, light that up, and then what we'll do is we'll just go to the beginning of the track, and we'll just move the ellipse off screen by manipulating the X position here. So if you click and don't let go, but click and don't let go, and then sort of drag off to the side, you can kind of drag off to the side until it goes completely off the screen. And then we'll just play this and see how this looks. Oh, that's good. Okay, so with that done, let's add our text. Now I'm going to use Arial for my text. You can use whatever you'd like, but I will say try to do two things. Try to find, whenever you type your text, so I'm just going to type my name here. Alright, and I'll move this to be more centered inside this, off to the side here. See if I can make it take it a little bit more room in terms of its horizontal space. Let's do this. Let's make sure that we choose a font that is a sans serif font. If you don't know what that means, sans serif simply means you are missing these little caps and these little tails on the bottoms and on the tops of your letters. Let's do something that looks a little cleaner than this right here. I'm going to use the arrow keys here to reposition this. Let's actually make sure this shows up at the very beginning. Right about there. I'll just position this slightly more in the center. So I'll take my text tool, I'll select the text in here, and I'll make sure I have this set to something that's a little more clean. I'm going to choose Arial, and the reason why is because when you choose Arial, you're given several different weights to choose from. So let me find Arial right here. And it's set to narrow. I'm going to set it to regular for now. As you see right here, we've got these little things. Make sure you have one that has the ability to make it bold. So I'm going to have mine regular right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my first name. So select your first name, and let's see if we can't make that bold. I'll make that bold, which will differentiate it slightly from the last name here. In fact, I might even make it even darker by choosing black, which is going to make it even darker. So in this case, I'll actually make this slightly smaller. So I'm going to use my select tool here and just shrink this down some so it fits better inside the box. So you can choose a different font, but just make sure you have a font that allows you to put some differentiation between the first and the last name. That gives it just a little bit, a little bit more of a kind of a sort of a design element to it. So let's click off of that, and let's click the text tool again, and let's make our subtitle. So you want to make sure that you click off of that, so when you click back, it's going to create a new graphic down here. And I'm just going to make my title. Your title can be your grade. I'm going to make this all caps, AV Lab Teacher, and I'll make sure this is set to something a little bit different. I'll make sure this is set to be narrow, and I'll shrink this down a good deal. Get a little shrink tool here, so it fits well inside the subtitle box, and line it up with your name here too. Now with this done, this can't be a whole lot taller, but it can be a good deal wider. So in order to wider without stretching it, we can affect the space between the letters by going to the tracking. The tracking is this little down here. Once again, in my effect controls, with all this selected, I want to find my text little box, and I want to find my tracking right here. So the tracking has this little V and then an A next to each other because they line up really well. But you can just sort of click without letting go and just drag upwards until it takes up the entire, or at least most, of the lower third subtitle here. So that will look nice there. Okay, and I'll just ripple delete this to have it appear back here. And let's do this. Okay, so with that done, let's find the moment where the rectangles sort of appear in general. Instead of applying a wipe, the wipe will work differently for our text tools. I'm going to apply a mask. So let me click on my John Labello, my name here, and I'm going to go to my opacity. And I'm going to click right here where I see create a 4-point polygon mask. As soon as I do this, my name's going to disappear, and you're going to see this little mask kind of show up here. The mask is interesting because if you click on the different points, you can adjust the points themselves and make this be a little bit wonky in shape here. I'm going to go to the middle and sort of drag this down over my name, and you can see there's a bit of a fuzz to it, a bit of an edge to it. I'm going to get rid of that by clicking on mask feather and just going to 0. Okay, and to get those controls back, I'm going to click back on to mask 1, and I'm going to move the mask points over to where I can see the entire name. It doesn't have to be a perfect square, just to where you can see the name, like so. And so with this is going to be saved like this with the points where they are. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a keyframe and sort of animate this coming into fruition throughout the entire transition of the lower third. So I'm going to create my little keyframe here by clicking my mask path stopwatch right there, which is going to cause the animation to show up. And I'm going to go to the very beginning, and I'm going to click once again on mask 1. And I'm going to just move the entire mask off to the side to where I can see where the entire name is sort of obscured there. And so now when I press play, it's going to come in right about the same time. That came in a bit too fast, so I'm going to pull this keyframe out a few frames to see if I can't make it come in a little bit later, a little bit delayed, so it doesn't go in past the shall we say, the lower third there. So let's see here. Once again, it comes in a bit too fast. Well, I'll just pull this off a few more seconds. There we go. That's really good. Let's see how this looks. That's good. Okay, and we'll actually click on this right here, and we'll just right-click on it. We'll do a. If we can't. Alright, so let's right-click on this, let's press copy, and then let's just click on this right here, and we'll right-click on it, and we'll say paste attributes, and we'll just make sure all this opacity stuff is there, press OK, and this should give us the same little mask attached to it here. In this case, the mask is in the same spot, so let's go over here to our AV Lab teacher, and click on mask 1, and just move it down. In this case, we made a new keyframe here, so I'll just get rid of that, and I'll take off this side slightly, and let's see how this looks now. Okay, good. Alright, so that looks about right, and we'll just kind of call that done. So this is one of those things, again, you can get rid of the background, you can export this as an animation that you can then apply to anything you want, but obviously what you would want to do is you would want to have this kind of saved for, say for instance, a, shall we say, be able to edit the text on it. So this would look good if I was showing up as in, like, being interviewed or something like that. It's the same thing with you. All right, so let's go ahead and export this as an MP4 with the color matte intact, and we'll be able to make more for when we create when we start doing our little news packages later on during the year here. So we'll just call this once again cancel. We'll just file export media. And, obviously it's called Lower Third Below, and we'll just press export. All right, well, very good. Cannot wait to see you guys produce. See you in class.